When you fail and your tendency is to go smaller, do the opposite and go bigger.
Why are experimentation and risk important in business?
Here's why. The current of the river of life will always try and pull you towards the middle, towards complacency and mediocrity. And whether or not you disdain that personally, I don't like it, but professionally, here's the problem with that. Other companies who don't give into that current and who don't wind up in the middle will eclipse you. Because the catch-22 is companies and organizations tend to be comfortable with the tried and the true, but the audience and your customers want the new and the different. So the only tools, the best tools you have for swimming against that current of mediocrity are experimentation and risk and taking chances. And you have to do it to grow and to become a great company. You can become an okay company by not doing it, but if you want to be great, you got to take a shot.
How can businesses then foster an innovative culture in their workplace?
I think innovation takes a little bit of being nuts. I think being a little crazy or being a little nuts is very, very helpful for innovation. So I'll give you a story from my own background. I became very, very lucky and became head of an independent film studio when I was very, very young. And we were sort of the Netflix of the day. We had to make like 70, 80 movies a year. And mostly we made horror movies and action movies and very, fun commercial stuff. But along comes this movie called Platoon. And I wanted to co-finance and co-produce with another studio, Platoon. And this was not at all our format. I mean, the people in it became stars, but they weren't stars. It was a very serious topic about the Vietnam War. But to his incredible credit, my boss, who was a great disruptive entrepreneur, said, okay, you're head of production. You want to do it? You can do it. But here's the thing. You bet your job. If it fails, you're fired. What do you want to do? So being young and stupid or smart and whatever, I took the shot. And I saw the movie one early morning at a film festival in Italy where it was just finished and they showed me the cut. And I think I'm the only person who ever laughed their way through the first screening of Platoon thinking, oh my God, I'm not getting fired. It's great, it's great, it's great. And so Platoon goes on to win Best Picture of the year at the Oscars. A few years later, I ran into the director at a bar in New York one night and he said to me, kid, I always like you. You have a touch of the madness. And I always thought, that's it, a touch of the madness. That's what we need. That's what I look for in actors. That's what I look for in employees. That's what I try and foster in myself. That's what I think companies have to foster in their environment, the way my boss and that director, and at that time we had a culture of a touch of the madness. You want to go make a movie with a bunch of unknowns about the Vietnam War? Okay, here's your shot, but you got to gamble. Touch of the madness is the way to do it.
So as a producer, you have raised over $1 billion for the film business. What advice do you have for business leaders who also need to generate investment?
I think the thing that I find that's other than the usual, never give up, be relentless and so forth, is call everybody and anybody. You never know where it's going to come from. If I had a phenomenal professor at Cornell in my undergrad who taught me, you can call anybody in the world. And I've been doing it ever since. All kinds of people I just call up to meet. And even when I went to grad school at Wharton, we had to do I was doing a paper on Warner Brothers for my thesis. So I just called the chairman of Warner Brothers. I said, I'm a student at Wharton. He called me back. We spoke for an hour. He was so great that I actually used my student loan to buy stock in Warner Brothers, which is, I don't recommend doing, but fortunately it worked out. But the point is you can call anybody. And if we were to do a kind of regression analysis on all the deals we've done, 50% come from the normal sources, great investment bankers, great lawyers, and so forth. 50% come from who the hell knows? So whether it's that person sitting next to you on a plane or someone you think, gee, I'd love to meet so-and-so, call anybody and everybody because you never know where it's going to come from. So what if they laugh at you? I mean, what do you know? What's going to happen? This guy won't fall in. People laugh at me all the time. People still laugh at me. I don't care.
How did you break into the film industry?
I knew I wanted to be a movie producer since I was a little kid. I walked around Boston where I grew up saying to my parents, I'm going to go to Hollywood and be a movie producer when I was really a little kid. But how to do it? I had wonderful parents, but we didn't have a lot of money and no connections. And so in Boston, there's an unusual school, a high school, which is the oldest high school in America. Benjamin Franklin went there. And it acts like a private school, but it's not. You have to, if you take a test and get in, you can go for free. And it's a little far away from where I live, and it's in a sense, it's not fun. It's like going to school in 1872. It's a very strict old school, but it has, and I think still has, a great track record of getting kids into good colleges. So from the time I was a little kid, you have to think, I'm going to take a test. I'm going to get into Boston Latin. I'm going to get into Boston Latin. I did. And then from Boston Latin, I went to Cornell and I went to Wharton. And at Cornell and Wharton, I did internship after internship after internship, figuring I would just somehow meet the right people. And the internship I had the summer of my 2 years between years at Wharton was in the film department of HBO. And when I graduated from HBO, I had 2 offers. I mean, when I graduated from Wharton, I had 2 offers. One was to go work at HBO, and the other was to go work at this independent startup film studio named Vestron, started by a guy who had left HBO. And I really didn't know what to do, but it was my boss at HBO who said, you have to go work here, because at HBO, we'd love to have you, but you're going to be in a cubicle for 7 years. There, you will get, it's a risk, and it's an experiment, but you will get hands-on filmmaking day one. And thank goodness I went to Vestron, and the first thing we did was making Michael Jackson's Thriller. So it worked.
So throughout that process then, can you describe an experience throughout your filmmaking career where you maybe faced failure, and how did you overcome the challenge?
You know, you face failure in the film business all the time. You just don't sit around cavalierly and chat about it in interviews at the Cannes Film Festival. But I think the important thing is what you do with it, like what happens afterwards. And the tendency when you fail is to kind of, you know, retreat, go smaller, try something less ambitious the next time. You know, Premiere Magazine once called me wildly overambitious, and I take a little bit of happiness and no, not take a little bit of Schadenfreude knowing there's no more Premiere Magazine. But and so you tend to think, well, maybe I shouldn't be. But I found when you fail and your tendency is to go smaller, do the opposite and go bigger. So that company, Vestron, I worked for, was a fantastic company. I worked there for 6 years, and the company wound up going bankrupt. It's a long story why, and they were later vindicated, and it wasn't me, but it happened. And, you know, it was our place, our first place. The next movie I made after that, and we made hundreds of movies, but none of them over $10 million. The next movie I made after that was Terminator 2, which was the most expensive movie in history at the time. And then during the financial crisis of whatever, 12 years ago, we had a movie that just went down in the middle of the production. The financial crisis hit and our financiers left. So now it's over, I'm trying to think, how can I go make another movie? And I decided, well, rather than raising money for one, I'll raise money for a slate of 12. And that worked. So my best advice when you hit failure is go bigger, not smaller.
Is if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Be still and know. So here's what that means. And I'll give you how I got to that. So I used to think that when there was a problem, you just simply yell louder, worry more, be more frantic, stay up all night and solve the problem. And in a sense, it works. You don't feel so great about it. People around you don't feel so great about it. And, you know, eventually maybe you run out of it. But I used to think that was the way to do it. And I mentioned how I call people I'm interested in meeting. Several years ago, for our Mortal Kombat movies, I found a Zen master, a Zen Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh. He's very, very well known. And I called him up because I thought he'd be good inspiration for one of our characters in Mortal Kombat. And I went to see him for that. But 2 hours into going to see him and some of his monks, they live in France, but they were in California, I felt like I'd been on vacation for 2 weeks. And I said, what's your secret? And he said, no secret, practice. And I said, I can learn this. And we became friends. And I actually wound up making a documentary about them a few years ago. But one of the things he taught me was that he said, be still and know. Because I asked him this question. I said, I get a lot done, but I'm frantic and I'm yelling all the time. And his analogy is this. Imagine a mountain lake, an alpine lake, in a beautiful mountain setting. If the water is all agitated, it won't reflect the mountaintops and the snow-capped mountains and the clouds in the sky correctly. And if you're using that as your insight into the world, you'll make a mistake. But if you calm that lake, and it's like glass, it will reflect the mountains and the clouds and the snow caps perfectly. And then you can see. So actually, by calming yourself, which I used to think was, you can't do this, not only do you feel better and do the people around you feel better, but you actually get more insight and you see the answer better and you make better decisions. So now, you know, you were talking at the beginning about some franticness on movies and stuff. Now when that happens, where I used to just react by yelling, I take my dog and go for a walk on the beach.